Hello, I'm Ioana, a senior data scientist, and in this video I'll share with you 5 habits to interpret a histogram that I've built over the years, one of which saved me in a job interview, plus how to build histograms yourself. Histograms are useful for numerical variables. If you don't know what a numerical variable is, I suggest you check that video on variables first. Probably you have already seen histograms before, in the news reporting the income distribution of households or on TripAdvisor showing the waiting time by hour in your favorite takeaway. Histograms are a useful tool when we want to see how the values of a single numerical variable are distributed. Before diving into how histograms are interpreted, let's build one ourselves. We are spoiled. Free coffee for the employees in our company. But the barista has to order it daily, so it's always fresh and tasty. So he starts logging the consumed amount of coffee in grams every day to optimize the amount he orders. This visualization doesn't help him much. A histogram is what we are looking for when A, the variable is continuous, and B, we are interested in how frequent a certain value is. But how do we build it from the data? For intuition purposes, I'm just flipping the initial plot such that the quantities are now on the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, we still have the day ID, but this will change to represent the frequency, or the number of times a value occurs. Instead of looking at individual values, histograms group values together. So we build 6 intervals and count how many points, or days in our case, fall within each of these intervals. The height of each bar will represent the amount of points that belong to it. So there it is, the histogram that describes how employee coffee consumption is distributed. But let's see, how do we interpret a histogram? The values on the horizontal axis are called bins. They are in fact ordered and non-overlapping ranges of values. The vertical axis represents the frequency, the number of values that fall in each of the bins. The highest bin is called the peak, and it represents the mode or the most frequent value. The extremes are called tails, and they can be either to the left or right. A different number of bins can tell a different story. A histogram with 2 peaks is said to be bimodal, or with more peaks, multimodal. Gaps can indicate the existence of outliers if they are present in the tails of the histogram. Each one of these histograms represents a distribution of accommodation cost for different cities. The first aspect that you want to look into when interpreting a histogram is so important I can't even emphasize enough. It's not just that plots are not informative when decoupled from values, but even worse, they can be misleading. In a job interview, I was asked to compare 2 histograms, like the left and the central one, and having this habit was a saver for me. What would you answer? Have you even noticed that the left and the central plots are exactly the same, except for having the y-axis shifted by 100 points? So now I don't even open my mouth before checking the vertical axis value range. Keep in mind the vertical axis can indicate either one of the relative or absolute frequencies. The first obvious thing that I look for in a histogram is whether the data is symmetrically distributed or not. Symmetry looks like in the first plot. Drawing a vertical line through the middle of the peak results in 2 identical mirroring halves. How would we interpret it? Well, the rent cost among people in their 20s follows a normal symmetrical distribution. Half of the people in their 20s pay under the median value of 1,100 euros for rent every month. 80% of people pay under 1,500 euros monthly. This is a city where one can live with few or much money. When the data is not symmetrical, it is skewed either to the right or to the left, depending in which direction the tail drags it. The central histogram tells a story about a small amount of people who pay an exceptionally high rent. Who are these outliers? One might want to further investigate. The rightmost histogram depicts a city with high rent cost, where paying between 1,200 and 1,500 euros is the norm. There are just a few enjoying a low rent cost. The symmetry is assessed also by comparing the mean and the median. The next thing that I look for in a histogram is how fat and spread out are the tails. The tails are accounting for extreme events, extreme per se meaning rarity in occurring. Therefore, we expect these extreme events to occur with a low frequency. Having fat or heavy tails, like in the left plot, indicates that the chances of extreme values are high. A histogram with slim tails describes a situation where extreme values have a lower chance of occurring as expected. There is more predictability in the second scenario. Kurtosis is therefore a measure of stability and predictability of a variable. The number of peaks provides information about how many underlying groups there are in the data. Each peak or mode would indicate one group. The histogram on the right depicts a scenario where some people in their 20s work and others still study. So those who work are affording to spend more on rent, whereas the students are either living with their parents or cutting on rent costs by sharing the apartment. The single peak in the left histogram exemplifies a unimodal histogram of people in their 20s and working. There are some measures that I report alongside histograms like the average, the median, and the mode, but also the variance or the standard deviation. This measure indicates how much do values diverge from the mean or how much variability there is in the data. Did you know that the population pyramid is actually two histograms back to back, one for women and one for men? It looks at the age distribution of people, usually but not limited to a country. All the percentages next to the bins add up to 100%. Age bins are built from ages ranging from 0 to, well, currently 122 years and 164 days as the longest lived ever person would argue. That's Jeanne Calment. So I hope now you know more about histograms and feel more confident to interpret them. Hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with our videos. See you next time!